Is the screen visible to all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
So we're discussing the markets in my last class, and we discussed the capital market and money market. And the capital market, I told you there are two markets, the primary market and the secondary market. So let's understand the relationship between the primary and the secondary market. The industrial securities market, which is nothing but the stock market usually, is divided into two parts, namely the primary and the secondary. One aspect of their relationship is that they differ from each other organizationally and they have some similarities also. So, what is the relationship? They differ from each other because in primary market you issue the shares for the first time, but in the secondary market already issued shares by the company are traded in between the investors. So it is not a first time issue. Already existing shares in the market are traded from one investor to another. So that is the difference. And there are a few similarities also, like both the markets help to get funds to the companies, help in growth and development of the economy, creating employment opportunities, and overall converts the savings into investments. So there are a few similarities and a few differences between the two. First, let's understand the differences, then we'll look at the similarities. Primary market deals with new securities. So as I told you, for the first time they are issued, so they're called as new securities. They were not previously available or offered by the companies. Secondary market, on the other hand, is the market of old securities. Old means already existing in the market, the shares which were issued earlier, which may be defined as securities which have been already issued already and granted stock exchange quotation. So they're already listed on the stock exchange and they're trading in the market. The primary market is not rooted in any particular spot and has no geographical existence. There is no place where you will find the primary market. It all happens virtually. There's a news that an IPO is being issued. Then you need to apply for it through your demat account. The money will get deducted from your account, and if the shares are allotted to you, shares will come to your demat account. So it all happens virtually. There is no geographical or physical existence of this market where you can go and see the primary market. Whereas in case of secondary market, there is a physical existence. If you go to the stock exchange, or you go to Bombay Stock Exchange, or you go to NSE, you physically have that building there wherein you can go inside. So it has a geographical existence. It is located at a particular place. Primary market is concerned with new securities. It provides additional funds to the companies because when the company issues new securities and you buy it, the money goes to the company. So it is providing funds to the company. Whereas in the secondary market, there is no additional funds to the company. Already, which shares are there in the market, one investor is buying, the other investor is selling. Company nowhere comes into picture. So when I buy from maybe I buy it from some shares from Francis and he sells it to me. It is in between me and Francis, not company. So if we are buying and selling maybe Polyhedron shares, so it is in between me and Francis. Polyhedron doesn't come into picture. So this is how it is in secondary market. Company doesn't get any additional funds or company is not getting any money. It is between the two investors. So these were the major three differences between a primary and a secondary market. Now we'll look at the similarities. So stock exchange listing, one aspect of inseparable connection between them is that the securities issued in the primary market are invariably listed in an organized stock exchange for dealings in them. So when you issue a security in the primary market, you need to list it on the stock exchange. So whether you trade with that share in the primary or secondary market, stock exchange listing is important for both the markets. So that is one of the similarity. Both will trade in only those shares which are listed on the stock exchange. Control, the stock exchange exercises control over the organization of new issue in terms of regulations and frameworks that are made, rules and regulations. The new issue securities which seek stock listing have to comply with the statutory rules and regulations framed by the stock exchange. So both the primary market and the secondary market are controlled by the stock exchange. For the primary market, when the company is issuing shares for the first time, it has to follow all the rules and regulations of the stock exchange and then do it. After the shares are issued and listed on the stock exchange, again the listed shares have to follow the rules and regulations given by the stock exchange. So the control in both the market is of the stock exchange. If they fail to do so, if they don't follow the rules and regulations, then the stock will not be listed in the stock market. And this shows that the stock exchange has control over primary market and the two are closely related. So both the markets is controlled by a stock exchange. Economic interdependence. Both the market interdepend on each other, or you can say they are economically interdependent. The market of new and old securities are economically an integral part of a single market, that is the industrial securities market. So industrial securities market is nothing but the stock market. So both primary market and secondary market are integral or important part of the stock market. Their mutual interdependence from economic point of view has two dimensions. How they are interdependent on each other. Primary cannot work with secondary and secondary cannot work without primary. So how they are dependent? One activity in the new issue market and the movement in the price of stock exchange securities are broadly related. First one, the is new one means it's the first point where it is showing interdependence. So the first point, activity in the new issue market and the movement in the price of stock exchange securities are broadly related. New issue increases when share values are rising and vice versa. So how a company decides that I should be issuing new shares or no, depending upon the share prices in the secondary market. If your share prices in the secondary market are rising, that means people are buying your shares, there is demand for your shares and the prices are increasing. In that case, if you need additional funds and you issue new shares, people will buy them as and when you issue. But if the share price is falling, people are not buying your shares. In that case, if you make a new issue, nobody is going to buy it from you. So you need to issue the new shares, you need to check what is happening to the prices in the secondary market. If the prices are increasing, you can easily issue new shares and get money. But if they're decreasing, then you'll have to think whether people will buy those new shares or not. The second dimension is that the price of new issue are influenced by the price movements on the stock market. So at what price you're going to issue the new shares, that also depends on what is the price in the secondary market. So suppose ABC Limited wants to issue new shares and they already have some shares in the market. If the already existing share is trading for 150 rupees, that means public is ready to pay up to 150 rupees for their share. So when they're issuing the new share, it cannot be more than 150. Either they have to issue it for 150 or less than that. So the new issue should be priced at what price I should be selling them can be decided looking at the secondary market, wherein your existing shares are already trading. So at what price they are trading, looking at that, you can decide the price for the new issue. So this is how they are interdependent on each other. So that was about the similarities between the primary market and secondary market. So we understood what are the differences and what are the similarities between the two markets. The next is the functions of secondary market. So why stock market is required, that is NSE and BSE, and what are its functions? Nexus, that is the meaning of nexus is connection. So connection between savings and investments. The savings of the community are mobilized and channeled by stock exchanges for investment into those sectors and units which are favored by the community at a large. So stock exchange acts like an intermediary where it takes savings of the common man and channelizes it, that is, it allows to move those savings to the companies and it will move it in those sectors which are favored by most of the people. So when I am thinking of investing in stock market today, I am thinking of investing in some pharmaceutical company because of the pandemic, the demand for pharmaceutical shares is very high. So I'm favoring that, or I'm thinking of investing it in some FMCG or essential goods company because the demand for them during the pandemic is also too high. Or I will think of investing in some IT company because everything has gone online. So internet connectivity and all those are in boom and demand. So telecommunication or something that is growing very high. So what I'm trying to say here is the stock exchange acts as an intermediary and it converts the savings that we have into investment and puts in those sectors which we favor. So if all of us are favoring pharmaceutical sector, we will all invest in the pharmaceutical sector. So the money goes to that sector. So it is the stock exchange which is helping us to put money in whichever sector that we favor or we like. Stock exchange renders this service by arranging for the preliminary distribution of new issue of capital. The, they assist in flotation of new issue by acting as brokers or underwriters. So stock exchange also helps in new issue of the shares, not only putting the existing, not only looking at the existing shares, but when newly company issues shares, it helps the companies as a broker or underwriter in helping them to issue shares to the general public and get money from them. Stock exchange also facilitates trading of existing securities listed in the secondary market. So it will help in new issue for the first time if you are issuing, it will help you to float or issue those shares in the market. And once they are issued, it will also help to trade in the secondary market. So one investor buys it from other, that flexibility also is given here. The second function of secondary market is it gives you a marketplace to trade. So once the shares are issued, it is not that if you have bought the shares once of ABC Limited, you need to keep it for lifetime. You buy it today, you don't want to keep it, you can sell it tomorrow or very next moment or in an hour or so. So during the trading hours, anytime you can sell it. So it is providing a marketplace. If you're buying some share, you need not get stuck with it. There is a marketplace available where you can go and sell it whenever you want to. So purchase and sale of securities is allowed by the secondary market and the marketplace is provided for that. It helps in free transferability through several successive stages from the original subscriber to the never ending list of buyers. So I might have got IRFC shares as an IPO. So I am the original buyer of those shares. But if I don't want to keep them with me, I can easily sell it to Farin. Then if she needs it, then Farin can sell it to Francis. Francis can sell it to Namrata. Maybe Namrata can sell it to Annapurneshwari. So there is a never ending list of buyers. I didn't want it, I gave it to Farin. After that, Farin can sell it to anybody else. So there are various buyers. The shares keep changing hands. They keep going from one person to another whenever the first person or the person who holds it doesn't need it. This guarantees stability to the one who has already invested and surety of purchase to the one who desires to invest. So if I have already bought IRFC shares, I know that I can sell them anytime. So I have a stability that my money is not stuck. I can sell them in the stock market and get my money back whenever I want. And if somebody is planning to invest in IRFC, they are also sure that whenever I'm willing to buy, if I call my broker, he will look at the availability and he will buy the shares. So it is giving surety to me as well as the buyer. Whenever he desires to buy, he'll get the shares. Next, it helps in continuous price formation. Now, how it helps in continuous price formation? Depending upon the demand and supply of shares. So if there is huge demand for certain shares, the prices of that share will increase. If there is no demand and many people are selling, the prices of those shares will come down. So it helps you in price formation, and on daily basis you can check the price of the shares that you have bought. So almost daily or every minute the prices keep changing, you can keep a track of it. The third major function or the process is the process of continuous price formation. There is an ever-changing demand and supply conditions and collective judgment of many people operating simultaneously, which results in continuous revaluation of assets, with today's price being yesterday's price altered. So What is today's price? Whatever was the yesterday's closing, that is getting altered, and we are getting the today's price. And it is corrected and adjusted. And tomorrow's price being today's price altered, corrected and adjusted. So what will be the price of the share tomorrow? Suppose Infosys shares today is for 1350. Tomorrow's price will be 1350 plus or minus depending upon the demand or supply. And what was the price yesterday? Suppose yesterday was 1320. So today's price will be 1320. If the demand is more, plus something, so the price will increase. If the demand is less, minus, because the price will decrease. So it is a continuous formation of price. We will see today's price and we can see find the tomorrow's price depending on the demand and supply tomorrow. So it is adjusted, altered depending on the continuous demand and supply conditions. The process is never ending one. Stock exchange thus acts as a barometer. Barometer is a like a thermometer, how it tells the temperature. Similarly, a barometer is something that measures the health of the economy. So it acts like a thermometer, you can say, to measure the health of the economy continuously. So whether the economy is performing good or bad, as soon as there is some news in the market and the stock market crashes, the stock prices fall down, we say that, oh, the economy is in slowdown, the market is falling. But if the prices increase and the stock market increases, we say that, okay, Indian economy is growing because the stock prices are increasing. So the NSE and BSE, whatever happens to that stock market, that acts like a barometer or a thermometer which tells the health of the country. So that was about secondary market function. Now primary market, I told you, is the market where we issue the shares for the first time. So what are its major functions? We'll understand. So primary market, it is the basic function is origination. Okay, I'll not read it fully. I'll just tell you, because for the first time the shares are issued in this market, we call it as a market which is originating or getting the shares for the first time to the public. So it is basically a new issue market, and the functions of issuing are performed by specialized agencies who act as the sponsors of the issue. So as I told you, they are also called as merchant bankers or investment bankers. They will help or support the company in issuing those shares. So we can also call them as sponsors of the issue. They are the ones who are helping or sponsoring the issue. One aspect is the before the issue, the very first thing that they do is they do the preliminary investigation, which entails a careful study of technical, economic, financial, and legal aspects of the issuing company. So any person who is becoming the merchant banker or investment banker blindly doesn't trust on the company. That particular bank or the institution will check the company's technical issues, economic, financial, and legal aspects thoroughly. And once they are satisfied, they agree to be the issue house or they agree to be the sponsor of the issue. The second function is to provide advisory services. So once all the technical requirements are checked and they're satisfied and they agree to become the sponsor, they start providing advice to the companies as to how the issue has to be done, how to improve the quality of the issue so that many people can buy it, what should be the technique of selling the shares, at what time the IPO should come out, what should be the magnitude or size of the issue, how much money you're going to take, how many shares you want to issue, and so on. So such things are being suggested by the merchant banker or the sponsor to the company. So the first function of primary market is to originate, that is give new shares, for which it will appoint a merchant banker or a sponsor. That person will study the entire company, and once it is satisfied, it will give advice to the company when to issue, how much shares to issue, at what price to issue. All these things of advices will be given. The second function of primary market is underwriting. So as underwriting, I had explained you earlier also that underwriting is nothing but wherein the merchant banker takes guarantee that if the shares are not bought by the public, I will buy it instead. So the merchant banker or the issuer or the sponsorer is taking the guarantee. The origination, howsoever thoroughly done, will not by itself guarantee the success of the issue. Therefore, the second specialist service is underwriting. provided by the institutional setup of the primary market takes the form of guarantee that the issue would be sold by eliminating the risk arising from uncertainty of public response. So, if HDFC Bank is my merchant banker, HDFC Bank gives me a specialized service called as underwriting, wherein HDFC Bank guarantees me that the issue will be entirely sold and there will be no risk on the company. So, eliminating the risk and taking the guarantee of selling the issue entirely, even if they are not sure how the public will respond, even if there is uncertainty, the bank guarantees it. So if the public is not buying, in turn the bank will buy. So that is underwriting issue, where you get a specialized service where the bank or the institution which is helping you guarantees the issue of your shares, and they
Excuse me,
take
ma'am.
the risk. They don't put any risk on it. Yes, tell me.
Ma'am, what is the advantage for the bank here? How are they earning?
They're going to get huge commission for doing it. This service is not for free. If you want somebody to be a guarantor or underwriter, the company has to pay a certain percentage of the issue. Suppose the issue is 10 lakh and the company says, I'll give you maybe 5% of the issue because you are my underwriter, because you are taking the risk. So of 10 lakh, 5% is got by the bank as commission. So they're going to get huge money. That is what they're going to earn. And usually what happens is, with the goodwill of the bank, people start buying the shares. And even if the bank buys it right now, later they can sell it. As of now, there might be no demand for the share, so few people have bought. Whichever was left out, the bank has bought, but the bank also becomes the partial owner of the company. And whenever the market price increases, the bank can sell those shares again to the public.
Okay, okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Next is, yeah, any other doubts?
No, ma'am.
Then next is distribution. So underwriting, however, is only a stopgap arrangement. It is not that once underwriting is taken, entire shares will be bought by the bank. It is just to guarantee that the company, that if it doesn't go, I will take it. So it is a stopgap arrangement where something goes wrong, I'll come into picture and I'll give you the guarantee and success of your issue. But the actual success of an issue ultimately depends on the ultimately, in the ultimate analysis, depends on the issue being acquired by the investing public. So when will you say your IPO is successful? When public buys the share and not the underwriter. So underwriter is just a guarantor. But if you want to tell that my issue was successful, then the general public has to buy your share. The sale of securities to the ultimate investor is known as distribution, or it is referred to as distribution. So if you give it to the public and they are buying it, you are distributing the shares. It is a specialist job which can be best performed by brokers and dealers in securities who maintain regular and direct contact with the ultimate investor. So usually you open your demat account with the brokers or the bankers, and they are the ones who will help in distributing the shares. They will deduct amount from your account and they will put shares in your account. So these are the ones who are specialized in it, and they will be in direct contact with the investor because the investor maintains demat account with them. So they can easily transfer shares to their account and deduct money from their account and transfer it to the company. So this is what is the functions of primary market. It is the origination, that is first time issue of shares. Then the brokers or the merchant bankers act like underwriters, and they also help in distribution of the shares. The next market, we started with money market, and then we came to capital market. Under capital market, we had primary market and secondary market. So this was about long-term capital and short-term capital. Now the next is the forex market. Forex market is nothing but foreign exchange market, where you can exchange. That means you can buy and sell currencies of different countries depending upon your demand and supply. So this market, the market in which participants are able to buy, sell, exchange, and speculate on currency. So they are either buying it, selling it, or exchanging the currencies, or speculating on it. Speculating means you feel that the exchange rate will be so much tomorrow, so you in advance you can exchange it today. So speculating is nothing but predicting the future and taking decision today. So people do that also. Foreign exchange markets are made up of banks. Usually, exchanging currency is given only to few people. Everybody cannot become a exchanger. So if you're going to any foreign country also, and when you go for currency exchange, you can't go to anybody and say, take this Indian rupees and give me US dollar. Only the authorized people who are authorized to exchange it, you can go to them. So who are those authorized people? They are banks, commercial companies, central banks, investment management firms, and retail forex brokers and investors. The forex market is considered to be the largest financial market in the world because currency exchange keeps happening. People keep traveling from one place to another. Companies keep purchasing and selling goods to other countries, import, export. They expand their businesses in other countries. So we keep trading with different currencies, and therefore the forex market is the largest market where day in and day out, lots and lots of currency is exchanged, bought, and sold. Okay, so if currency exchange is given to even private players, like I told you here, commercial companies or brokers and investors, but it is like a license. Everybody cannot do it. Only a few people are authorized to do it. Okay, so you can do it either from the banker or an officially authorized broker or investor or company. Next is commodity market. Commodity market, here we don't trade in the shares or currencies or interest rate or BSE or NSE, but here we trade in commodities. Some are essential ones and some are precious metals and all those. So a physical or a virtual marketplace for buying, selling and trading raw or primary products. So it can be a physical market where you actually go buy and sell, or it can also be a virtual market where you are trading with it but not taking the delivery, only the cash is getting transferred. So you can buy, sell or trade with raw or primary products. For investors' purpose, there are currently about 50 major commodity markets worldwide that facilitate investment trade in nearly 100 primary commodities. So all over the world, there are 50 commodity markets and they help in buying and selling around 100 primary commodities. It's more than 100, but then at least 100 are available. That's how it means. So commodities are split into two types. Which all commodities we can buy? The hard and the soft commodities. Hard commodities are basically natural resources that must be mined or extracted, like gold, silver, rubber, oil, something that is extracted or mined from the earth. We call them as hard commodity. Whereas soft commodities are basically the agricultural products or the livestock, like corn, wheat, coffee, sugar, soya bean. These are agricultural products. And then hen, goat, pork, these are livestock. Even these are traded in the commodity market. So commodity market helps you to trade with the commodities, not the financial instruments, shares, interest, currency, not those, but actual products which you can buy or sell. The next is,
Excuse me, sir. Excuse me, ma'am. Sorry. In the forex market, ma'am, when we saw the commercial companies which are involved, is it like Visa and Mastercard?
yeah, you can say that, or even I'm not remembering that traveler's name, but it's near Second Gate. I don't know how many of you remember. There's a big office. I'm not able to remember. Sangvesh is that person's name. In between Second Gate and Big Bazaar, he has his own traveling office. He's a travel agent and a big office. He is also an authorized dealer in currency exchange. So like that, there are a few people who are travel agents and they have the authority to even exchange the currency. So it's like a license which is given to a few members, private players who can do it on behalf of the government or the banks, because only giving it to banks will become too crowded. Everybody has to go there and wait and all that. So a few private players the licensed players are also given that
Okay.
particular authority.
Okay. Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Next is the stock market. Stock market, as you all know, is nothing but the secondary market, which we've already discussed. So stock market, as the name explains, deals with stocks or shares of a company floated at a stock exchange. The market in which shares of publicly held companies are issued and traded either through exchanges. It is also known as equity market or secondary market. Okay, so this was different types of markets that we understood.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
is commodity market trading limited to the national level or it also applicable for the overseas, ma'am?
Is also available overseas. That's what I told you. There are around 50 commodity markets all over the world. It is on you in which market you want to deal with.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Now, the next part of the chapter is sources of finance. So, we understood what are the different markets through which we can trade. Now, we will understand what are the different instruments that will help us to get money. So, what are the sources through which we can get the finance? So, when I talk of sources of finance, we have shares, debentures, venture capitalists, angel investors, so a lot of people who help us in getting money for, or who help the companies in getting money for investment purpose. So let's start with the first source today, that is shares. So shares, we basically call them equity shares or ordinary shares. These shares provide ownership rights to the ordinary shareholders. So when we buy certain company shares, we basically become the owners of that company for that much amount of that share that we have bought. They are the legal owners of the company. So maybe if I have bought one share of Tata Motors for 500 rupees. So I have become legally owner of Tata Motors, but not the entire company. How much I have invested, by that much portion, that part of 500, I am the owner of that company. So if the entire company is of 100 crores, in that 100 crores, 500 rupees worth owner is me. So if I have bought 1 lakh shares, 500 into 1 lakh, that much amount of ownership is what I have in that company. So each one of us who has that company shares are owners, but only for our part or our proportion. As a result, they have residual claims on income and assets of the company. So residual claim means remaining. At the end, what remains is what the equity shareholders get, because the equity shareholders call themselves as the owner. So if you are the owner, you cannot take the profits or everything of the company first. You need to first pay interest, you need to pay tax, you need to pay preference dividend. After everything is paid, if anything remains, that goes to the owner. Same way, if we all are owners of the company as equity shareholders, we have residual claim. That means at the end, what remains, on that we can claim. So residual claim on the income and assets of the company, because we are owners. And as owners, we have the right to elect the board of directors and maintain their proportionate ownership in the company. So all the shareholders, if they come together, they have voting rights and they can vote and decide who will be the board of directors of the company and what will be their proportionate ownership in the company. So in decision making, in appointing the board, we all can play a role. So whenever the company keeps an annual general meeting, an invitation comes, we can attend it virtually or we can personally go and attend that particular meeting and help in the decision making process. So what are the features of a share? Very first is, if you have an equity share, you have residual claim to the income. Residual means, again I'm repeating, whatever remains at the end, that is what equity shareholders are going to get. They are entitled to get the remaining income or profit of the company after all outside claims are met, because everybody is not owner of the company. Bank is an outsider from whom we have taken loan. So first I have to pay bank interest. Debenture holders are outsiders who have bought bonds from the company and given loan to the company. So first I have to pay interest to the debenture holders. Preference shareholders are outsiders because we don't treat them like owners of the company. So first I have to give dividend to preference shareholders. So once all the outsiders claims are met, and if then something remains, then as a owner we are supposed to get that particular income. The earnings available to equity shareholders are equal to the earnings before interest and tax. So when you get EBIT, from that you minus interest, you pay interest first, then you pay tax, so you minus tax, and then you pay preference dividend. So from EBIT you minus interest, you minus tax, and you minus preference dividend. After that, if anything remains, is what is going to come to the equity shareholder. The second feature is residual claim on assets. If the company closes down or shuts down and the court of law comes into picture and sells the assets of the company, we are the ones, the equity shareholders are the ones who will get the last claim on the asset. You're not the first one to tell, okay, you've sold the asset, now give my money. No. Once the assets are sold, first the banker's loan will be repaid, then the debenture holders will be given, then the preference shareholders will be paid, and then whatever remains will go to the equity shareholders. So at the time of liquidation or close down or shut down of the company, we are the one who are going to claim on the assets of the company at the end, because as equity shareholders we are the owners of the company, and when the company closes down, the owner doesn't get everything first. All the outsiders who have given money, you need to repay them first, and then whatever remains will go to the owner. So we have residual claim over income as well as assets. Next is we have the right to control. So if we are equity shareholders, we can control the company. So the managers or the board of directors cannot decide everything on their own. They need to have voting, and equity shareholders have the right to vote for the decision. If everybody votes, then that decision will be taken. If majority of the shareholders are against certain decision, then that particular thing won't work. Okay, one of the example I'll give you. I don't know how many of you have heard, but in between Microsoft was trying to take over Yahoo, but the shareholders of Yahoo didn't wanted this merger and takeover to happen. The board of directors wanted this to happen. They tried their level best, but the shareholders voted against. Shareholders, by shareholders I mean the people who hold majority of the shares. Okay, if I have one share of Yahoo, I cannot go and actually vote because I'll not even be knowing, and I don't have that much time and energy to do it. But if I have 5 lakh, 10 lakh shares of Yahoo, I'm 5%, 10% owner, then I'll have a say because I have invested huge amount, and then I'll be voting, and I will decide whether the merger should happen or no. So the merger actually didn't happen because the shareholders didn't allow it to happen. Even if the board of directors wanted to do it, the shareholders didn't agree. Microsoft gave multiple offers to the shareholders, and they increased the prices also, that we are going to buy you at a higher price. But then somehow it didn't materialize, and Microsoft took back the deal and said we cannot wait for long. So they went for some other options. So this is how the shareholders have control power. Everything cannot be done by the directors and managers. They need to take decision with the opinion of the shareholders or the voting of the shareholders. So as owners of the company, the equity shareholders have the right to control the operations of the company and to participate in the management of the company. Their control is indirect. The major policies or decisions and day-to-day operations are approved by the board of directors appointed by the shareholders. So the board of directors who are appointed by the shareholders, the decision they can take, but the approval of the decision has to be done by the shareholder. Limited liability. As shareholders, we have limited liability. I gave you an example in my previous class also. Suppose you have got Infosys shares for 1350 rupees, and tomorrow Infosys closes down. How much you're going to lose? You're going to lose only your 1350 rupees, because that is what you have invested. So the share price can maximum become zero, and you can lose your entire investment. So the liability is limited to the amount that you have invested. Your private property won't be taken. You need not pay the loans of Infosys. The court won't come to your house and sell your assets and do it. So this, because the companies and the owners are separate entities. So the company is liable to pay. As a owner, how much I've put in the company, that much I will lose. So I have a limited liability. Although the equity shareholders share the ownership risk, their liability is limited to the extent of their investment. So how much money you have invested, only that much you're going to lose. Next is voting system. The ordinary shareholders exercise their right to control through voting in the meetings of the company. According to the majority rule voting, each share carries one vote. So one share if you have, it is as good as one vote. So depending on how many people vote for and against the decision will be taken. So there is voting right to each and every shareholder. The next is preemptive right. Now what is preemptive right? Whenever the company is thinking of issuing new shares, the first option should be given to the existing shareholders. So suppose, let's take example, I have one TCS shares and TCS is coming with the new issue. So I have the right to get the new issue shares first. So it is like preemptive right. That means already existing shareholders will get the first opportunity to purchase that additional issue of shares. If they don't want to purchase or if they deny to purchase, then those shares will go to the general public and the public will get the right to get those particular shares. And how, what is the proportion in which I can purchase? I can purchase it on the pro rata basis. That means if I have one share, I get the right to buy one more additional share. If I have 5 shares, I get the right to buy 5 more additional shares. So depending upon what is my existing shares, number of shares, I can claim for new issue shares also. So that is called as pro rata basis. That means depending on what you already have, the existing current holding, you can claim for the new holding in the same proportion. The option to the shareholders to purchase a specified number of equity shares at a stated price during a given period is called rights. So preemptive rights means because you are already having the shares, so you have the right. And this option will be given to the shareholders for a fixed duration of time, wherein you say that in the next 5 days, if you are interested to buy the newly issued shares of the company at this price, you let us know. If in 5 days the existing shareholders don't respond, then those shares can be issued to the general public and anybody from the public can buy. So these were the features of shares. If you are an equity shareholder, these are the features. Then the advantages and disadvantages of ordinary shares. It is a permanent capital as they do not have maturity dates. Now, when you buy a company shares, it doesn't have maturity. It's not a bond that will mature in 5 years or 10 years. So it's not a loan. You're giving money to the company to run the business. So it's a permanent capital. There is no maturity for it. If you don't want the shares, you sell it in the secondary market. Like if I don't want TCS shares, I told you I can sell it to Francis and come out of it. Francis can keep it as long as he wants and he can sell it to maybe Prathamesh and come out of it. So it all depends on whenever you want, you can exit from the market, somebody else will buy the shares. So there is no maturity period or end period for the company because we say that the companies are going concern. There's never ending. It keeps on running. Same way, the shares are also going concern. Till the company is there, the shares will be there. It increases the base of the firm and thus increases its borrowing limits. The more the share capital, the more you will have the borrowing limits from banks or debenture holders. Because when there is more share capital means the owner's contribution is high. And when the owner's contribution is high, that means the owners have taken more risk in the business. So the bankers will look at the owner's contribution and even give you more loan because they know when owners are putting so much money, that means they are taking more risk. The business has potential to grow. So they will also show confidence and they will give you more loans. So more the equity capital, more you have the borrowing limits. A company is not legally bound to pay dividends to the equity shareholders when the profits are insufficient or firm have need of funds for investment in profitable opportunities. It can reduce or suspend payment of dividends. So there is no compulsion that equity shareholders will get dividend every year. If in any year the profits are less or there is loss or there is a better investment opportunity, you may get less dividend or no dividend for that particular year. Disadvantages: the control of the corporate is affected by the issuance of equity shares. For the company, the more the equity shares, the lesser the control the board of directors have, because every time they have to take permission from equity shareholders before deciding anything. The exclusive use of ordinary shares as a medium of capital eliminates the advantages likely to accrue from the policy of trading on equity. So if you are only using ordinary shares, you will lose on the advantages of taking loan. So what is trading on equity is, depending on how much equity you have, you can ask for loans from the banks or debenture holders, because you say that, see, so much is the owner's capital. So looking at that, the banks and bond holders believe in you and say that when owners are contributing so much of amount, we can also give them some loan. So depending, you're looking at your equity, people are giving you loans. So that is trading on equity. Now that is an advantage, because when you get loans, usually the interest rates and loans are much cheaper than what you pay as equity dividend and equity issue cost, floating cost. So they say debentures or loans are a cheaper source of finance. Secondly, when you have loans and what interest you are paying, on that interest you can save taxes. So that is another advantage. So if you are only depending on fully on equity, you will lose on the advantages that you get by taking a loan or by issuing debentures. That is another disadvantage. You can't fully 100% rely on equity. You should have a better combination, some proportion in loan and some proportion in owner's capital or equity capital. The excessive use of equity shares may result in overcapitalization in future when the earning capacity of the firm fails to raise up to the desired level of equity provided. If you go on increasing your equity shareholders and equity base, after some time when your profits won't increase, same profit will be shared among so many people. So each one will get lesser proportion of profits. And then they start feeling that the company is not doing well, dividends have reduced, profits have reduced. But the problem is the profits and dividends are increasing. Actually, the profits are increasing. But because the shareholders are also increasing every time, that profit has to be shared among many people. That is the reason people start feeling that we are getting less amount of profit. So having too much of equity shareholders is also not good. More number of equity shareholders means the profit will be shared among more people, and each one individually will get a very small portion. Ordinary shares are riskier from investors' point of view, as there is uncertainty regarding dividend and capital gains. So it is riskier from our point of view, not company's point of view, but from people like you and me who invest in the shares. It is risky to invest in the share market or stock market, because there is no guarantee that you will get dividend. Whenever the company makes profits, it will give, and there is no guarantee that the share prices will also increase. So capital gains is nothing but when the market price of the share increases, you can sell the share and get your entire money back. So there is no guarantee that the market price of the share will increase all the time. It may even fall if the company is performing bad, or if there is a economy slowdown or the economy is performing bad. So as investors, we are at risk when we invest in the stock market, in the company. So these are the disadvantages. The next is debentures. This will continue in my next class, that is on Monday. If possible, we'll finish this thing on Monday, and Wednesday's class will start with the next unit, which is time value of money and cost of capital. If not, whatever remains will wind up on Wednesday and start with the second. If you have any doubts, you can ask. Otherwise, you can type your roll numbers. and leave the meeting. After the class, I'll have a small discussion on WhatsApp group. So be active on when to conduct an extra class for the remaining small portion of accounting. So today at what time we'll discuss on the WhatsApp. So be active. If any doubts, you can ask me.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yeah.
Ma'am, this stock market is related only to the equity shares, right?
Yes.
So if we want to purchase like buy preference shares, then how we can do that?
See, preference shares, no, the word itself says the company is preferring to give it to you. So it is not given to general public. If you are close to the owner of the company, directors of the company, they know you and they want to give you those shares. Only then you can become a preference shareholder. So preference shareholders, and you cannot buy one share or two shares when you are the preference shareholder. You get a lot of 100 shares, 500 shares, where the company issues those shares only to one or two people and get the money that is required. So preference shareholders is not for public. It is not listed on the stock market, and it is not given to people like you and me who are general ordinary people. They are the people who are preferred by the company. So it can be some big businessman or some rich wealthy person who has been approached and asked to give money and in turn gets a preference share. That's why we don't call them ordinary share or equity share, and we don't find them on the stock market.
Okay, ma'am.
Any other doubts you can ask?
Ma'am, now Zomato is providing IPOs, like
Hmm.
they are introducing IPOs. So if we invest in that, is it good?
See, now it
General
depends
question.
on how you analyze that particular company. If you feel that it is going to stay for long run, there will be demand for food deliveries in the future. People are going to order food from outside and eat even after this pandemic. If you analyze these factors and you're satisfied and you feel yes, it's going to work, then maybe you can invest in the IPO and trust on that company. And you also need to check the financial details of Zomato, which are available online, because when they give issue for an IPO, they need to give their financial records. So if you go to the websites, and just send you the links of those websites. Um, I'm not remembering the name now. On WhatsApp, I'll send you. If you go there now, you can check that company's IPO issue date, when it is going to close, what is the financial performance in the last 2 3 years, what was their previous year profits, and even their experts give advice whether you should invest or not invest in this particular share. So using those, you can analyze. There are a few people on YouTube also who make a video for every IPO. Like, I don't know if you have heard about CA Ratna Ranade. She does a video for every IPO, and she does the entire analysis of the company, wherein she tells whether it's good to buy or no, what is company's profit, what is their strength, what is their
Rachna
weakness.
Ranade, ma'am.
Rachna Ranade, yeah. So if you watch such videos also, they don't give you directly advice whether you should buy or no, but they will analyze the company and show you, and then you can decide depending on the analysis whether you are interesting or willing to buy or no. So it all depends on individuals. I may invest in Zomato thinking it has growth, but somebody else may feel no, Swiggy is going to go better than that. A few people may feel people cannot order online for the next 2 3 years because of this corona pandemic. So these companies are not going to grow. So each one of us have different views. We can only take advices, suggestions, look at the analysis, but the final decision is to be done by the investor. Any other doubts?
Ma'am, from company's point of view,
Hmm.
like we should list our company in a stock market, or it is better to stay without giving selling stock market.
See, if you want to be a private company, you have sufficient funds, your money is enough for your business to run, you can stay without listing. But usually, why companies get listed is because once they are listed, they can get money from the public. and a huge amount of capital can come in, which can be used to expand the business. So companies who have expansion opportunities and have limited capital, they basically go for public issue listing, get money from general public, and use that money to expand their base in the country, to create more employment opportunities and to earn more and more profit. So it all depends on you. If your money is sufficient for you and with that you're happy, there is no need to get listed and you can run your business as you're running it. But if you want to expand and whatever capital you have is limited, you feel that you need more money. So instead of going and borrowing more and more, and you cannot borrow as much as you want also. There's a limit. Banks, debenture holders will also give you loans up to a certain limit. Nobody can keep giving you loans as and when you want. So in that case, if there is additional capital required, you can list your company, take the money from the public, make them the owners or equity shareholders of your company, and use that money for your growth expansion plan.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Ma'am, I had no doubt, but I just had a question.
Huh.
Ma'am, when are our first sem exams gonna be conducted? Like, is there any idea?
Um, it all depends on when this lockdown is going to end and when the government is going to order to start the schools and colleges. If we get an order that yes,